returning to Pearls. Pearls Part 2, or Gestalt Therapy Part 2. So when we last ended, we were talking about different layers of neurosis and becoming our true self after we have had our explosive layer. Pearls also talks about the things which we do to defend ourselves. And we talked about Freud. We talked about the psychic defenses that we put up to protect ourselves from the world. So part of our protection is these layers of onion, which kind of keep our true explosive layer from being seen or shared with others. We keep these in place, and we kind of keep ourselves safe from true awareness and the risks that entails. Because, I mean, I guess one can say, well, why isn't everyone just their real, genuine, fully aware self at all times? Why isn't this just the picture of human nature? And the reason for that is because it can be scary, because it can be dangerous, because if you're your true self in some situations, other people might just, stomp you down very quickly, and that hurts. Or you may think that my true self isn't good enough, and if I go, into a social situation, or I go into a work situation, and I really share my thoughts and my attitudes and my beliefs and feelings, other people might just stomp on them, and that would hurt terribly. So we kind of look around to others for cues of what do I wear, and how do I act, and how do I look, and how much should I talk, and how quiet should I be. And these are all the things that help us put all these onion layers in place and kind of protect our true self, because it's much safer to have a false self if someone says, boy, that's a dumb idea, than it is to really be sharing your true innermost thoughts and feelings and beliefs and values, and have somebody cut that down. It's just very painful. So that's sort of how it is that we build this up. But what the Gestalt therapists say is, but then you tie up, you bind up all of your energy in this false self, and you go through a fake life. And do you really want to go through life not being you? Wouldn't you rather risk the pain of changing and becoming who you're really supposed to be than to spend all of this energy being someone who you're not, and one day when you're 70 years old, look back and say, I've never really lived. I've spent my whole life so busy being who I'm not that I've wasted 70 years of possibly being who I am. So the purpose is to help you be who you are from this point on. Anyway, the defenses that the Gestalt folks talk about. Introjection. The sense of introjection is kind of when we take another person's beliefs, ideas, attitudes, values, and we just sort of accept them completely uncritically. So introjection is something that young kids sort of do very naturally. If you look at a toddler to a preschool age kid to a school age kid, very often they adopt, their family's beliefs, their family's values, their family's religion, their family's sense of reality. The friends, the parents often will sort of, help shape kids' social circles so that friends that the parents think are sort of good friends are who the kids hang out with, and bad friends sort of get steered away from. And kids kind of buy into this. They don't think twice about it. They sort of introject or take in their parents' beliefs, values, attitudes, goal, path of life, quite sort of, that's just the way it is. Then they hit adolescence, and everything often, or at least much, will change. But in early childhood, this is just sort of natural. You don't even really think about that. So anyway, the name for that is introjection, and I'm not sure that Pearls would necessarily see it as a defense in someone who's 3 years old. He may just see it more as a way of life. But when adults start just uncritically, okay, everything you say, my boss is right all the time, my spouse is right all the time, you don't look at it, that's introjection. Projection is the same as projection by the analysts, and actually introjection the analysts talk about as well, but I don't think we talked about it. Projection is when you take your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, attitudes, values, and so forth, and you thrust them out of yourself onto somebody else. So that if you're really, really, really angry with your partner about something, and they're just sort of going on doing fine, you walk home from work. You look at them and you say, "Why are you mad at me?" And your partner says, "I'm not mad at you." "Yes, you are." And your partner says, "I'm not mad at you at all." "You are too. Look at how you're acting." That's projection. It's taking how you're feeling and sort of thrusting it upon them and believing that they're feeling it towards you. Oftentimes when this will really be noticed in couples is if one person in a couple is contemplating the idea of having an affair or is having an affair, they may start noticing in their partner all these things and start, "I wonder if he's cheating on me. Geez, he's starting to act suspicious." It's not necessarily that the partner is doing anything, but your own sort of unconscious fears, worries, so forth, guilt about your own behavior, you take out of yourself and you thrust on that other person. People who are paranoid take all of their sort of inner hostility and toss it out and believe not that I sort of have inner hostility, but that everybody in the world is hostile and out to get me. They project a lot of their thoughts, beliefs, and feelings on others and think that it's coming at them. Retroflexion is something which is more unique to Gestalt therapy, and this is the idea of doing to ourselves what we would like to do to somebody else. So you may see this, I've seen this most classically in my clinical work, if I'm working with people who self-mutilate. And let's say that someone has just really, really been enraged by a friend or a partner. And let's say this is a client who's a cutter. So you get someone who her boyfriend has just made her so mad. So she comes home and she pulls out a razor blade and she cuts herself. Or someone gets so mad, a school kid gets so mad at their teacher, they start banging their head against the wall. Well, if you were to explain this as retroflexion, that could be, my boyfriend made me so mad I have to hurt myself. The school kid and my teacher makes me so mad I have to hit my head against the wall. Now, they're hurting themselves. They're not hurting the other person. So they are retroflecting the feelings they have towards someone else and doing it to themselves instead. That is how a Gestalt interpretation of retroflexion would be. Confluence is this idea of the blurring of the boundary between oneself and the external world. And again, this is very natural in babyhood. There's a very strong belief that when we're born, this mommy and I are one idea, that babies really probably don't see where mom stops and baby begins. But as we develop, we differentiate, we turn into ourselves, we start realizing I have physical boundaries, I have psychological boundaries, and I stop here and mom starts there. The idea of confluence in adulthood is where people sort of blend with others in their environment. This can be a healthy sort of confluence where you just really feel very connected. If you're married to someone, it's good probably to have some sense of we are very connected, we are interdependent, we work well together, we enjoy one another's company, we share beliefs and values to a certain extent. But a healthy relationship also, but I stop here and you start there. So if you just don't quite know where you stop and where your partner begins, then confluence has become sort of unhealthy. And if something happens to your partner, it feels like it's happening to you. Parents will share this with kids, where if their kid gets hurt, we as parents just ache for them. That's a sense of confluence, of not quite knowing where the child stops and the parent begins, a sense of blending together. And to a certain extent, as I said, in a close relationship, there is some interweaving, but it's healthy to know this is me and this is you. And the last one up here, this idea of deflection. Deflection is just sort of this interruption in our awareness, and we sort of deflect things off onto something else. So it's like, I can't maintain this connection right now, so I'm going to deflect it onto something else. I can't, continue to pay attention to you, or you're talking to me about something and it's really making me nervous. Gosh, how about those mariners? You're deflecting things to go someplace else. So anyway, these are defenses that if you practice Gestalt therapy, again, you'll kind of perk your ears up to listen for when it is that clients are doing this. So now, if our main focus is helping people to become aware, we're focusing on the present, the here and now. We're asking people about the here and now by the how and now. And we understand this idea of behavior in a context. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. What in the world do we do when somebody comes into our office and we're practicing Gestalt therapist? The main focus is the purpose of Gestalt therapy is helping people to become the real who they're meant to be. So you want to remember the purpose is awareness, the purpose is genuineness, the purpose is help the person to be real instead of to be phony. This is done some through basic talk therapy. If you read books about Gestalt therapy, you will also come to appreciate that there are lots and lots and lots and lots of techniques that Gestalt therapists incorporate in order to be able to actualize this or bring it about. Your text goes through some of these techniques. Other texts go through other techniques. There are lots of them, and as people have sort of developed Gestalt therapy, they'll sort of sometimes throw their own things into the mix as well. But as you're doing the techniques, it's important to remember the purpose of the techniques, because tricks and tools are all helpful as long as you keep the goal in mind. But if you start just doing the tricks and tools and you get lost in the sidelines, then you're losing your sense of focus, and the therapy can just become kind of this hodgepodge, goofy mess of techniques with no guiding principles. So you have to remember, awareness is where it's at, helping the person to be real, who they are, in touch with their emotions, in touch with their thoughts, in touch with their body, here at this present moment in my office right now. This is a model also which has been done a lot in group work, as I talked about at the beginning. There were a number of encounter groups. It's also still done in groups today, and it can be really helpful when you have a number of people sitting around kind of helping one another to be in touch with sort of their sense of being, their sense of how they're feeling right here, right now. So it's a model which lends itself nicely to the group approach. Some of the techniques which the Gestalt therapists use, certainly the most classic technique that if you ever hear people use the term Gestalt, they'll say, well, I'm kind of an eclectic therapist, and I use a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I like the Gestalt empty chair technique. Or, well, I had a client in my office yesterday, and we decided to use that Gestalt empty chair thing. Now, they may know nothing about Gestalt therapy, the purpose of Gestalt therapy, the founders of Gestalt therapy, anything about Gestalt psychology or human behavior, but they know that empty chair and Gestalt words go together. So what's the empty chair technique? The empty chair technique is this idea that Gestaltists talk a lot about unfinished business. Unfinished business is the stuff that's this we like to seek a closure idea. It's the stuff that preys upon us. It's really wish that I would have talked with my mom about thus and such. Or, when I was 18 and we moved from my hometown, I never said goodbye to my best friend. And we moved halfway around the globe, and I just wish I could have said bye. This has preyed upon me. I'm 70 years old now. It's preyed, and I wonder if she's even still alive. These things are unfinished business. Oftentimes, particularly if family members and close friends die, before we've had a sense to say goodbye, people are left with this sense of unfinished business. And that can be really very sad. One of the things people will say is better for relatives about a slower death than a sudden death is that there's an opportunity for closure. There's an opportunity to say all the things that you wanted to say. People don't always take those opportunities, but there is the opportunity. So an empty chair is an opportunity if somebody has passed away, lives in Australia, or just isn't in the session now where you don't feel comfortable enough actually talking with them. To, Grandma, I really wish. And so what you have the client do is the client will look in the empty chair, and they can imagine that in that chair is the individual that they would like to have had a conversation with. And then they can speak with the empty chair as if grandma is sitting in that empty chair. They can speak to the empty chair as if they're, the neighbor down the road who molested them from the age of 7 to 15 was there. And they know that neighbor is still alive, locked in prison somewhere, but they just don't have the courage to talk to them. But they have all these feelings bottled up, and they want closure. They want to get rid of this unfinished business. They could talk to an empty chair and get some of that stuff out. You can also use the chair to talk to part of yourself. So you could talk with sometimes there's a splitting of the self. There's the part of me that wants to be good and healthy and eat right and exercise and have real relationships. And there's a part of me that's just a lazy slouch who wants to go home and sit on the couch and eat potato chips and drink soda and not work. And you can converse the two parts of yourself together in different chairs, and sometimes you sit here and you sit there and you sit here and you sit there and you go back. Anyway, that's some of the ways to use the empty chair, which is probably the best known Gestalt technique. Therapists pay a lot of attention to one's nonverbal behavior. So, bring out another empty chair. If you have somebody who's sitting here and you say, so how are you feeling today? I'm feeling really good. And the therapist says, say again? I'm feeling really good about everything today. Well, the therapist would point out that while you may say you're feeling really good about everything, you don't look that way. Or if someone comes in and you say, so how are things with, you and your boyfriend? I'm just so mad at him. Oh, he's just bugging me to no end. The Gestalt therapist would again point out this disconnect that you're laughing and you're smiling, and yet you're talking about the fact that you're very angry. Does this make sense to you? So pointing out the nonverbal behavior, and that's sometimes what they'll have people do is to exaggerate, so that if you're saying you're feeling terrible, someone will tell a story, oh yeah, remember when I was a kid, I was beaten by my dad, he was so mean to me, it was terrible. And their emotions and their story just don't fit. Well, you point out this nonverbal behavior or something, and then sometimes have people exaggerate what it is that they're doing. So, could you smile just a little bit? Oh, you do that. Or if people are, looking very down and so forth, could you look more downcast? Could you, become the sadness or become the anger? So really to try to take your nonverbals and exaggerate them so people become aware of them. Again, it's this idea of raising awareness, because if you just do a little of something, it may be very unconscious, but if you have people really recognize what their body's doing, they're more likely to become in touch with what signals they're sending off. They're more likely to become in touch with what the feeling is. And that, again, helps them to become whole, helps them to become integrated into thoughts and feelings and behavior and attitude all kind of coming together. They also look very much at how you use language and sort of excuses that people use in their language. So that if you talk about something and you say, well, he made me do it. Externalizing is not a good idea. So he made me do it, or, if you say, if people externalize so that, well, a person might have to do this. Can you change from a person might have to do this to I have to do this? Or a person might feel really mad in that situation, or someone in that situation might feel really angry. Can you take ownership? I feel really angry in that situation. But kind of pointing out how we avoid responsibility in our language by use of disclaimers, by use of the third person, by use of you, instead of by saying I. Sometimes Gestalt therapists will have to say, and I take responsibility for that. I got a C- in my class, and I take responsibility for it, instead of, I got a C- because, well, because my mom got sick and I had to go visit her and the teacher didn't like me. I got a C- in my class, and I take responsibility for that. So that you really appreciate my life is mine. It's my choices, it's my feelings, it's my thoughts, it's all put together, and I'm the one who's in charge. I'm in the driver's seat. And the techniques are really all to kind of help heighten our sense of self, our sense of awareness to focus on the present, just so we can kind of be who we are and not keep putting up these phony artificial onion layers. And I think that's probably about all I'm going to talk about for Gestalt.